My name is Ramit Kanda. I'm the Senior Product Line Manager under Ronnie, also a Chief Product Owner for APIC-EM. Very happy to be here. Tim did actually a phenomenal job in talking about the nuts and bolts of QoS. So as Ronnie said, the task that was given to us was, how can you take all the complexity, abstract that out, and only expose the things that an administrator actually really cares about. For QoS, it is all about application experience, right? Improving your application experience. So we know that, so we build this application as a day one application which allows you to deploy quality service end-to-end, with minimum complexity, and also in the process lowering your cost of deploying QoS end-to-end as well. So the way this works is that, there is an assumption here, you put the controller in, that you have discovered the devices, and then also you have tagged your WAN interfaces, right? So gone are those days where, you could very easily distinguish between your WAN and your LAN interfaces. Now, these days, your WAN interfaces look very similar to your LAN interfaces. These are like geeky interfaces, for example, and then shaped to a subline rate on top of that. So in the shipping code, what we have is actually you have to go to the WAN interface, and you essentially in the description you hashtag the interface as a WAN interface. And in the future versions, we are thinking about how we can actually improve the UX for that, bring that into the UI. So once that is done, the next step is essentially that you create a policy scope. What is a scope? Essentially defining, I think somebody asked earlier, it would be really nice if I can try it out in a lab. We got your ask about, being able to test it in viral. Absolutely. So we are working on that, right? But when it comes to, still trying to put it in production, and you have a lab environment, you may want to start from there and say, hey, I've tested it in my lab environment, it looks great. Now, how can I apply it in production? Two ways. You define a scope. You either define a new scope and simply clone the policy, or essentially you add the production devices and take out your lab devices from it, and then just reapply the policy. So scope essentially defines the perimeter of that policy within which the policy is going to reside, right? The next step is essentially defining your applications, right? So you have defined my scope of my policy. I want to know what applications I want to prioritize, right, and improve the experience for. So we already have pre-provisioned about 1,300 plus applications. Tim talked about that. But we also know that most enterprises, they also have their own custom applications, right? So story won't be complete, without giving you the option to allow you to create your own application. So you do that. On top of that, you also should have the ability to define which apps are favorite apps. Because you have all these different devices with different capabilities, right? If I can actually provision, let's say, 100 ACLs or 100 applications, I want to make sure that if I cannot provision everything, the first 100 applications that are provisioned, of which 20 applications are favorite, should be the ones that are provisioned first. So I get the biggest bang for the buck, right? So we'll show you the workflow, how you can easily tag an application as a favorite application. And then you simply apply the policy, and before that, there's an optional step. You ask for, I want to know whether my policy is going to work or not. So everything, the entire QoS is actually modeled inside the controller. So when you define your strategic intent using the controller, you actually take it through a dry run. You say, show me what exactly policy configuration you're going to put on each device, right? And now you may have very well standardized your environment across 3-4 different type of platforms, right? It means if you have 1,000 devices, you don't 1,000 different platforms, right? Hopefully not. But so you can actually spot check the devices. And then last step is, once again, you guys asked for this. You said, hey, you know what? You apply the policy. In case something goes wrong, I don't want to manually back that out. So from the start, we actually had this back on mind. We need to support that, and we actually support that. So we maintain full history of all the changes you have made, and we have made rollback as easy as provisioning your policies in the network.
So here's a question. Prerequisite step 2. You've got up there. Tag your WAN interfaces, your WAN QoS, blah, 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 right? The rest of it seems very straightforward, and somewhat, easy, right?
Yep.
That one, if you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of devices in an enterprise network that you're trying to control policy for end to end, we're either assuming that, to make it easy, we're either assuming that every single deployed device has the same types of WAN interfaces, the same number, the same, name, Ethernet 0 or, whatever. If that's not the case, how do you handle that?
Right. So great question. So right now, you actually go to the WAN interface, like I said, you add a description. In the future, we are actually thinking about adding a logic where you define your logic and say, the first interface or every device or second interface of every device, when on these type of routers are my WAN routers. So automatically tag that. But then the next question is obviously, I have different interfaces, right? Are all of them, shaped to 300 meg? But because then you started getting to complexity. Some are 300 meg, some are 150 meg. So we're trying to bring that into the UI. So at that time, you pull up the router, say, here's the interface. It says, is it a LAN or a WAN? You say, it's a WAN interface. Is it shaped or not? Is it shaped? Then it says, OK, now you're connected to different service providers. All these service providers, may not support the same type of 4-class or 6-class model. The markings may be very different. So now I need to know what service provider policy I need to attach. Right? So today, we just add all that information in a description. We say hashtag WAN, hashtag 300 meg or 30 meg, hashtag service provider profile X. You're done. And that's it. You do it one time, and the controller takes care of it from then on. And let me show you that in the demo. Let's look at the demo. Let's get to the real stuff here. So here what I have is the live controller that we have been actually using, actually a Cisco Live. So what I have done is, let me zoom in a little bit, maybe that might help. So I have already defined a scope. Defining a scope is just very easy. You go here, or you just say, hey, you know what, here is my scope. Now you have just essentially just named the scope. You haven't really done anything more than that. Once I have done this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take few devices, select the devices, and simply drag and drop those devices into the scope. You're done. You have tagged the devices inside the controller with this particular scope tag. That's it. The next step is going to my application registry. Here is where you have about 1,300 plus applications which have been predefined, right? You can have different type of views. You can sort them by traffic classes. You can look at each individual application. You can obviously search for it as well. Just to expand on this, I talked earlier about tagging your applications as favorite applications. If you're looking at the pre-provisioned applications in the controller, you can actually click on this star. That is all that it takes to actually tag an application as favorite application. You're done with this tagging the application as favorite. And if you see on the right side, the number 12, that changes, it just changed to 13, right? Now let's create a custom application, right? So I go at the top and say, hey, I want to add a new application, and I'm going to name it as, tech field demo. And then maybe I want to define, you have different options here. You can say, hey, traffic coming from this application is already marked with certain DSCP value. You can select that option. You can also say, you know what, I want to define both data and control traffic, right? So in that case, maybe the application resides on a particular server. So I want to define the subnet. So you can go in here and you can simply just define that, the subnet here. And you can define the port numbers as well, if you like. And then you can define more, right? The control data, it may have multiple flows, so on and so forth. Let's just go in here, and you can then also define what traffic class it belongs to, because it's a custom app, or you can say similar to. When you say similar to, it pops up and says, here are all the applications. You tell me what this app is similar to. So we know what traffic class, how this app should be treated in the network, right? Then we say, create an application. I believe some of these ports are used. OK, so create application. OK, this port's for you, so we're simply going to override it. OK, the application has been added, right? OK, so let's assume I'm done with defining my custom applications. I'm done with defining my application as favorite applications. The next step is defining my policies, right? So here is the scope that we had created earlier, tech field A. Here are the 3 devices that we added as part of that scope. I actually am logged into couple of these devices, right? So here's a screen here. I am actually I've telneted into these boxes. So this is an access switch, branch access 1, and I have also opened a session to the branch router one. Let me actually move it, drag it a little bit to the right side so you can see it better. Okay. And when we actually provision the policy, we'll see what happens, right, on these devices. Okay, so let's go here and we are going to create a policy. So say create policy, says tech field, QoS, Las Vegas. And then at the bottom, what we have is we have 3 business relevance buckets, right? So as an administrator, all what you really care about is whether my applications are relevant or the applications are irrelevant. That means relevant, for example, are the applications which contribute to your business productivity, for example, like your ERP system, maybe Exchange, so on and so forth. Irrelevant are essentially all applications like BitTorrent, maybe an application that you want to actually really make sure it doesn't take more than 1% of my bandwidth, right? Goes into the scavenger class, which is business irrelevant. Everything else is best effort, goes into the default class. Customizing this is extremely easy. It's as easy as just taking any of these applications and dragging and dropping them, right? Or selecting multiple applications. So what we are going to do here is we're going to take all these, put them into the default. So you may start from scratch, for example. And then what I'm going to do is, here are some of the applications as you can see, we did some demos before. And I'm going to drag one of these applications here because these were the applications I created. And this is an application that is DSCP only. That means all the traffic coming from going to this application is actually marked with a certain DSCP value, right? So if I click here, it says that it's marked with CS5, right? So then we also have this application, tech field demo application that we created. We're going to drag that here. Another one is, for example, I want to define my this application SSH. I'm going to drag this here, and I'll tell you the reason why I just did that, because I want to show you that we have also added the option to define even more granular policies. So, for example, traffic going from a print server, from a printer to a print server, right? You may want to define the source for that traffic, right? Not only the source may not always be any. Right? So here the example that I'm giving is like, okay, all the traffic originating from the IT staff subnet, right, going to essentially SSH traffic should be handled a certain way. So here I can go in and I can say add consumer and I can say IT staff and then go here and say 50.50.50.0/24 and then essentially just create consumer and then I save it. Now I have, when I create this policy and apply it in the network, I should be able to see exactly a 5-tuple policy, right? Actually more like 4 because you will not have the source port, right? It's an IP subnet.
Now, do we have the option of creating more than the 3 classes here if we want more granularity in the whole system?
Great question. So these actually represent 12 classes. So that's the abstraction we have done, right?
Okay.
So this is, starting from the very far right, this is a scavenger class. We all get that, right? Mm-hmm. This is the best effort default. We all get that. The remaining 10 classes are in business relevant. Remember when I was in application registry, if I go back, we're going to lose this. But if we go to the application registry, for each application we have a traffic class. So all those represent the 10 classes in total.
Okay, so we can have different behaviors within the business relevant category,
exactly.
Where default and business irrelevant pretty much share a behavior.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So then what we are going to do is, this all looks good. Here, I don't see any much activity here. I'm going to say apply policy. All right. So now what controller is doing is it has changed to the policy status screen, right? Where I see these 3 devices, it says I need to provision 3 devices. So now the controller has taken the policy intent that I created using the UI, and it's now actually creating all the different type of policies, right? The classification marking policies, the ingress queuing policies, the egress queuing policies, the trust policies, so on and so forth.
And I can review those commands before you send them?
Yes.
Okay.
What mechanism is it using to send that? Is it just an SSH connection or is it using something else?
Yeah. So today it's using SSH connection. And you can see that it is on this particular switch. These actually translates to about 680 lines. And I've actually removed a lot of them, right?
Now, what happens if somebody goes and changes something in there by hand How does the APIC-EM handle that? Because in the past, tools tend to barf when you do that.
Yeah, so yesterday that came up in one of the discussions as well. So right now what we are doing is essentially if you reapply the policy, controller overrides whatever you have.
Is there a way to audit so that it'll tell me if someone has changed something?
No, so that is compliance. That is something we are working on. Right now it is not available, but that is something is the next step for us. We know that is a big pain point. QoS deployment is done, right? I trusted it has been done correctly, right? So now, how do I ensure that the policies are my enterprise network aligns with my enterprise QoS policy?
So if we link that to validation of experience, right?
Yes,
so if validation
exactly.
of experience comes back and says, we're not getting the experience we're expecting,
Yes.
then it would be cool if the APIC could go out and say, and by the way, that's because this is not in compliance. Right here, here's the spot.
Bingo. I think that's exactly the use case that we're working on.
Now,
we don't have that in the shipping code. That's why I didn't share it.
Right now, is the APIC-EM at least smart enough to check the time signatures on the configuration and say, that router's changed since I've touched it?
Yeah. So the controller has that information, right? But we need to bring the entire experience in the UI, right? So that is something we are working on. The controller has that intelligence, right? Because when you change something on the device, the controller knows that, for example, you hashtag the interface as a WAN interface. So now the interface, which was LAN before, now it's a WAN interface. The next time you apply the policy, the controller says, you know what? All the other devices, nothing has really changed. So I don't really need to apply the policy there. The only devices where I need to apply the policies are these devices with these interfaces, and those are the only interfaces where the information goes. So it knows the version of the policies, it knows what has changed. It's just that we need to provide the entire experience, and that's the reason why it is not in the UI yet.
So it's just a UI issue at this point?
Yes, so it is in the service itself. It needs to be exposed, not bound.
Okay. First thing the controller does when it logs in is do a show ver to make sure everything is.
So the controller has complete information. That's why I said in the first two steps, you have discovered the devices, and we have created the inventory. We know exactly what device it is. Is it 2K, 3K, 4K? Yeah. Does it have N-bar enabled or not? What protocol pack it has, 13, 14, 20, 21, whatever it has, and based on those capabilities, controller pushes the most appropriate to get the best out of that device, right? So you do not, you're not like standardizing on, I'm just going to do ACLs everywhere, whereas the device may support deep packet inspection capability. So if I go to this switch and I say, what did you really push? So this is what got pushed, right? This is the policy. This is a 12 class model, right? And then if I go here, actually DSCP.
Was
so
your
I've
question
added some
if it checks each time? Or was because you said it checks at discovery, but does it just check each time?
So
If I went and changed a WAN interface to a LAN interface, how does it detect that?
So anytime you change anything on the interface, there is a polling that happens every 30 minutes.
Okay, that's what I want. That's what.
Right. So and also if there are any interface related changes and there is an SNMP trap that goes out, so that's a trigger point. Then at that point we just go in and then re-inventory.
Oh, that's
okay. Good.
There, yeah. I like that.
So going back to what I remember a few apps I created, right? One of the apps was the DSCP app, right? So if you look very closely, right here, remark says DSCP only, and it says permit IP any DSCP CS5, right? And then it talks about which class we actually added that, right? The other one is so I've added some few alias commands here, and then the other one is this one. And actually looks like the alias command was not set up correctly. But if I go to the very bottom, I'll show you.
Sure, with APIC.
Quick question. I noticed your category, you're catching the DSCP with an access list there. Why is it catching it with an access list when the class map itself can just catch the DSCP with a straight match?
So that was just sort of an example showing that any traffic that is coming from that particular, for that application, if it is marked with DSCP, it was...
Okay, so in other words, you're doing it so that you have the option of a source or destination.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. So this is another application, remember we created IT staff where we said traffic source from that particular subnet. So you see that it created that permit TCP, that was subnet we gave, and then it is SSH traffic.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just wondering why you were matching the DSCP with the access
Yeah, that was
list.
just to kind of just show off that, okay, if you do this, then it's going to create an appropriate policy on the device, right? And last piece quickly on the router piece that I'll show you. So here is the actually QPM interface. So here's the egress interface, right? The WAN interface. You see in the description the hashtags?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's a service policy attached to that. So if I just say, QPM 03, so this is the policy that got attached, right? So, okay, so going back here, if I go back to this, there is, you talked about rollback. So if I make a change, I move this here and then reapply the policy. 1 second, I'll show you. Okay, so now I made a change. The controller actually knows exactly what you have changed. And it maintains the last history of the last 10 policy changes. And if at any given moment, you can go in and say, the policy that got pushed 5 days ago, which has been overwritten since then, I want to see the difference between that and my current. It shows the difference, and then you say, hey, great, I want to roll back. It says, boom, roll back. It takes everything back to its previous state.
Can you click on the difference button?
Yeah. There you go. I just moved BGP on, the default to the business relevant.
It's like Wikipedia for router policies.
Okay, so a few more things. I'm going to switch back real quick. And I'm going to answer some of the questions because that's not in the UI. It is available. It will be available actually the first week of September, right? So a few more things. First one is we talked about dry run, right? So here in this case, what we have here is, sorry about the resolution, it looks very poor. But before you apply, you can actually say dry run, right? Default is hidden, right? You can say, hey, show me. And says, here are all the devices, here are all the device types, here are the role of the devices, here are the device names, right? Because a 4K or 6K, for example, can be in the access layer, can be in the distribution, can be in the core. If you want to just spot check, because we're gaining trust and you want to know exactly what we're pushing, so you go here and you can look at, hey, I want to look at 6500, which is in the access. I also want to look at the distribution and core. You're not going to look at 1,000 devices configuration, right? You're going to spot check. And then it only shows you the Delta configuration, policy configuration changes. The next thing is, you guys asked for that, hey, you know what, look, if I'm pushing the configuration to 1,000 devices, and at some point I say, no, stop, something is going on and I want to stop the provisioning, there's an abort button. Abort, it stops, it takes it, and there's a transactionality. We support transactionality not only at the device level, but at the entire policy level. So if in the process of provisioning a device, right, the policy, if something fails, the controller rolls back that particular device. If you want to roll back the entire policy, then we give you that option as well. Or if you are in the process of deploying and you say abort, controller says, okay, stop right now, and now I need to actually start moving everything back to its previous state. And the last option I want to quickly talk about is restore, which is people have asked, hey, coming from a brownfield environment, I have configuration. We are okay with going to the APIC-EM based policy, but what if something doesn't go right, and I want to go back to my pre-APIC-EM days, right? Okay, click restore to original configuration, and boom, it puts the original QoS policy configuration. We don't touch the entire configuration. We only touch the policy piece of the configuration.
So going back to the previous screen you had with the various policies and things like that, when we say brownfield, we're not going to take the existing configuration in that router and bring it into APIC-EM with the nice policy display.
Yeah.
So you can brownfield the device, create new policies, and then sort of enable it to be automated with APIC-EM, but it's not going to show policies like that.
Yeah, so right now we model that policy configuration. We don't actually take that and show it, hey, you already have this policy, it is name XYZ. But at least what we are doing is we're saying, okay, we can restore your original. The level of effort is we think that is incremental in terms of defining your policy.
So if you want to begin from what the customer has, you pretty much have to translate what they have into APIC-EM yourself and then push.
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense. Now, quick question. So you're using command line to come in on that. Are you using the actual rollback functionality of the configuration command for your restores, or are you just keeping the previous version within APIC-EM?
So the question is, are we actually taking the policies through the policy model and then storing that information and then going step by step? Sorry, I didn't.
No, it's more when you deploy and you have the option of aborting. Are you using the router's rollback functionality, or is APIC just using its own?
APIC using its own, because we support brownfield and not all the devices support that.
Yep.
So we had to come up with a mechanism that is normalized, right? That works across all the devices. So the second piece of this of this QoS is essentially dynamic QoS, right? I'm just going to simply talk about it. So EasyQoS static QoS works for applications for which policies can be defined because they have deterministic behavior, right? In terms of the ports that they pick. What if the application, for example, a lot of these newer applications, take for example, Cisco has a Jabber application. This may be Skype for Business, right? When those applications are running as a soft client on a PC, you don't have an option to actually trust the entire PC, because if you do, then you're going to run into problems. Now, you can't put a policy either because ports are dynamic. Most people, what they do is permit UDP any equals 16,000 ports. At best, they match on the DSCP and they think that it's done. Actually, that is just a band-aid. Unfortunately, it does cause problems. So we have actually created this feature in the option in the controller is called dynamic QoS. I'm going to go straight to the solution in the interest of time. What it does is when a client calls another client and the session is being established, the application server, whether it's a COCM or it is Skype for Business, Microsoft Link server, or any other server, actually calls the northbound APIs of the controller and says, here is the session information, this is the voice of the video. The controller automatically actually, because it has the host awareness, it goes on the port where these endpoints are connected and pushes the right 5-tuple policy on that particular port, and then matching on that, it marks that with a certain DSCP value, right? So you have to take the guessing game out of this whole equation. So because you're programming at the very specifically at the per flow level.
Well, getting QoS tags out of a client PC is so brutally impossible to actually deploy.
Yeah.
You have to do it at the network where we're identifying the application at the network level, because getting it on every PC to actually put tags out is a real pain.
Exactly. So that's why we actually have the call manager in the when we come out with the release in 1.3 early September. COCM is also coming out with 11.5 SU1 version, where we have very tight integration, where it actually sends the session information, says here's a voice and video, it needs to be prioritized accordingly, and the controller takes care of that. And this is actually how it looks like. So once you have these policies, you are able to go into dynamic QoS. You can see it is enabled. You see all those policy flows. And then what we do on top of that is, if you want to troubleshoot, because the user says, I'm having a problem, I'm making a call, I'm still having a problem, we have an option where you click on this button and it launches a path trace, right? It says, here's a path for a given flow. I'm talking about a flow here, right? Here's a path for a given flow, and we'll give you statistics along that path. And that is a segue into my next one, which is path analysis. It's called flow path analysis. So one of the biggest problems that we have today is trying to actually identify a path for a given application flow. It's like finding a needle in the haystack, right? What we do today is, it's more of a hidden trial. We use primitive tools like traceroute, but we know that two flows between two endpoints may actually take totally different paths, right? So what the controller does, because it has complete awareness, type of device it is, its neighbor relationship, the protocol it is running, whether there is an ECMP along the path, we actually can tell you the exact path for a given application flow. This is available in the shipping code. So you go in, you describe the 5-tuple information. Some of these fields are optional. At the very bottom, it says, here are the stats. If you want to collect, you enable that, interface stats, device health information, performance monitoring stats, quality of service stats, as well as if there are any ACL rules blocking the traffic, we will actually match on that as well. So this is how it looks like. So here is the path for a given application flow, right? And the bottom, it actually shows you the device health information. It also shows the performance statistics, which shows the packet loss. It shows you the jitter value. It shows the DSCP value. It shows you the TTL. It shows you a lot of information. Today, if you have to enable performance monitoring on a device, you have to do it on a per flow basis. It is not an easy task. Controller will do this automatically for you, and it will disable it automatically for you. We have been testing this out quite a while. It has been available in shipping code. We have actually several partners. If you go on the show floor, they are actually integrating with this. Right? So this is, it tells you, hey, I looked at OSPF. This was an OSPF route. Or this was an EasyQoS multipath, and I used the hashing of that's taken place in the ASIC, which exactly tells me what is the next hop. Try to do this thing manually. I came from TAC like 17 years ago when I first started. I was in TAC. We used to do that actually manually, right? With the controller, it takes a few seconds.
It would take
all this
all day to set up.
Exactly.
That's a layer 2 and layer 3 hops in there. I mean, that's ridiculous.
That's
got it all.
So it's going to pull out it's going to do flow visibility in every one of those devices,
Yes.
and then display it like that.
Yes, to show you that this is a reality, I have about 45 seconds. I'll show you that this is real. This is the controller. It's not a picture that I have just created in PowerPoint. You can create anything. So it's right here. You can click on any device. There's the device stats right here. CPU information. There are stats right here. And last piece here is.
Well, that's through a cap lab tunnel too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whoa.
The cap lab tunnel goes through these layer 2 devices.
Yeah. Wow.
And to show you that
Why did
we are
you see
matching
that?
on the
That's
ACL. So I actually created a traffic. I said, I want to block FTP. So I have a traffic actually just, a traffic generator sending traffic to port 21. And it says, boom, I have 5,000 lines of ACL sitting on this device on the ingress interface, and it matched on that ACL. Try to find an ACL that's matching when you have, forget about 5,000, 100, I give you 100, right? And try to find the matching ACL. It's not an easy task to do.
What about asymmetric flows?
Oh.
Well, let me get started, he says.
Let me actually give you the.
I didn't expect you to be so excited about that.
I was waiting for someone to ask for that.
Look, right here. And we lay out the
And
path
there
exactly,
it
device by device.
I need this. I so need this.
Sorry, the view is screwed up because of
No,
this thing,
yeah,
but,
we get the.
it shows you device by device comparison. And if it's asymmetric, we'll show you that this is asymmetric.
That's beautiful. That's what that is.